What is up, everyone? Welcome to Elasmocast. Today we have a special guest, James Sulikowski, and we're going to be talking about shark moms, which is a really interesting topic, and I never really gave much thought, but apparently there's a whole bunch of cool stuff going on with them. So how are you doing, James?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. So what is your background and what are your key interests of study before we get into shark moms?
Yeah, so I know by training, I'm like a ecophysiologist. So I'm really interested in how animals are utilizing their environment from an ecological and physiological sort of aspect. And so I kind of blend those together with a primary focus on stress physiology and reproductive biology, and that's where Shark Moms comes in.
Awesome. And you're currently with, so you have the Coastal Oregon Marine Experiment Station in Oregon State University. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that's an interesting place. So we are a branch experiment station, and we're one of 11 in the state of Oregon. And each of the experiment stations has a stakeholder group that they work with. Some work with um, cows, some work with wheat and wine. Our stakeholder group is the seafood industry. So how do you better manage fish and sharks and other marine organisms while they're in the ocean, but also when they come out, how do you better handle them? How do you process them for the general public? So combination of those, and I direct that group. I have about 30 people that work for me, and at Oregon State, we're in the College of Agricultural Sciences. So really exciting to be there and do a lot of work on the coast.
Awesome. Yeah, so getting into your main one of your main focuses, shark moms, what does motherhood look like for sharks? Do they care for their young like what we see with mammal groups?
No, not at all. They're bad moms. Uh, but but that's okay. What we're really interested in is how we can protect moms. And that's the general kind of focus of our work. And it's revolved a lot around developing non-invasive ways to study reproduction. Back in the day, the only way you could really study a mom shark was to catch her and sacrifice her. You had to kill her and cut her open. And that's problematic, right? If the animal is an endangered species, or if the animal, we want to track her and see where she moves. And so it's really hard to track and watch where an animal that's dead goes, right? So that those two really don't go well together. So we really started developing techniques that had been around for a little while. We were kind of fine tuning them and putting them together. So using an ultrasound to see if a shark is pregnant, or to use blood hormone levels, and then to attach a tag to mom and see where she goes. And so, we've worked hard over the last 10 years or so, really perfecting those techniques.
Hmm. And what are some of the sharks that you have studied with these techniques?
Yeah, so we've been pretty lucky. We're really interested in the question, and not so much a focal species, but we've studied hammerheads, tiger sharks, porbeagle sharks. We've studied seven-gill sharks. We're studying Mako sharks now, white sharks. Gonna do some silky shark, Galapagos sharks. So yeah, a whole bunch of different species that we're really kind of collaborating with a lot of different groups to use our technology to help those sharks in those geographic areas that they may be found.
Hmm. And what have some of the findings that you have found with your research been? Anything interesting? Well,
Oh,
I'm sure a
man,
lot, but
well, the more we do it, it's always more questions kind of arise, which is something that keep drives us and keeps us going for sure. I'd say some of the coolest work, that we found, um, the most recent is working some of the work we're doing in the Maldives, and a great group there, a lot of different partners. We've got Miru, we've got Formula Dive Center, we've got Pelagic Divers, and a whole suite of great collaborators within those groups. And the questions were, these dive sites. in they're attracting different shark species, and are they how are they really functioning for that shark? And in the Maldives, there was a aggregation of tiger sharks. Can you imagine like 12, 13-foot tiger sharks? This kind of people looking at them, swimming around, and people were observing them change, like they were getting fatter. And they're like, "Oh my gosh, are they pregnant? Or are they like just really happy and well fed?" And so we all worked together and found out that, what, it's an aggregation of pregnant females, which is super cool, right? And the only one that we knew of in that part of the world. So, it's when you collaborate and you can answer different questions with different groups, I think is when the science is most positive and strongest. And so, yeah, we love collaborating. And so we're looking forward to that. A lot of upcoming studies as well.
Hmm. So you saying that you have a lot of tiger sharks that are all pregnant in the same place. Do they display any social behaviors, these mom sharks?
You know what? That's a really good question. They do. And that's another sort of angle of the work that we do at Oregon State. And, I'm lucky that I've got two other shark scientists that I work with, Taylor Chappell and Alex McInturf. And the three of us together are like a trifecta. We're like the only, pairings of three scientists at a university anywhere in the world. So it allows us to really study these animals in multiple different ways. And so we can pair the behavior with reproductive biology. So that's another thing we're really interested in is, are moms aggregating, right, at these gestation spots, and what's their social hierarchy, right? And how are they interacting with one another? Is there like a super, grandma that's, the dominant one, and how does she impact, and are her siblings also there and pregnant? As well. So those are all kind of questions that are the next kind of steps for us in some of this research.
Hmm. It's interesting. And could we talk about some of the different reproductive strategies that different sharks have?
Yeah, that's one of the things that makes it so interesting, but so frustrating at the same time. So you've got a group of sharks that are egg layers, and most sharks fall into that kind of category. And then, from that, they kind of split off to live bearers. And that's where it gets really cool and interesting. You've got sharks that it's aplacental viviparity, where mom basically is the egg case, and the babies kind of grow up in mom. They develop from a yolk. And when the yolk's gone, mom gives birth. And the little babies are mini-me's and kind of swim around, which is great, off to do their apex predator thing. And then you have oophagy, which is really cool. And that's the lamnids, the makos and white sharks and poor beagles, where mom will the babies will. So the cool thing about sharks is that they all start at the same relative reproductive sort of stage. They all develop within a yolk sac. And once that yolk sac is gone, that's where the cool stuff really happens. For an aplacental species where the mom's the egg case, they just give birth. But for one that has oophagy, once that yolk is gone, uh, instead of giving birth right away, mom ovulates eggs, right? And the babies eat the eggs, and their stomachs get like super distended. They're just chowing down. They're like little pigs in there, and they grow really, really fast. Um, and so they pop out fairly large and ready to go. Then you've got intrauterine cannibalism. The only shark we really know that does that is the sand tiger. That's been confirmed. There's some speculation on maybe the thresher shark might potentially Mako, but it's very inconclusive. But so sand tiger is it for now. And imagine that they start off with oophagy in a sense, and mom's sort of ovulating eggs and things, and those sort of dry up, and then they start eating each other. And the one really to develop teeth the quickest starts kind of eating everybody else and everything that's in there. And so mom gives birth to two babies, one on each of her uterus. So most sharks, all sharks have two uteri, and they can give live birth from both of those. So imagine that, you've eaten all your siblings. And there's not cool. And then finally, the last mode is placental, like mammals. And most of carcharianids, they have that kind of reproductive biology, and they develop, the yolk sacs are when it starts to disappear and gets used up, it morphs into a placental attachment, and mom provides all the nutrients, just like us. And then they give birth, and they go on their merry way as well. So really cool dynamic. And so for us, the cool part is that it is very diverse, but for the frustrating is that the hormonal signatures in those different reproductive modes vary because of how mom's producing eggs and other things that are related to that reproductive cycle. So we really have to understand that hormone and what they're doing at each stage for each one of those reproductive modes, which complicates it for us. But we're starting to get a handle on that. But the cool thing with an ultrasound, you don't need to worry about the hormones. You can see what's happening to mom right away. So it doesn't really matter about the mode, whether you can tell if they're pregnant or not. And so a lot of our work is focused now on an ultrasound, whether it's on the boat for animals that are captured or for ones that are swimming around, like in the Maldives. We can take the ultrasound underwater. So yeah, just pushing the edge, you know, as much as we
Mhm.
can.
And do mothers treat their offspring differently depending on which mode of reproduction they use?
Yeah, another really good question. No, not at all. I mean, moms basically, their goal is to carry that baby to term, um, and then find a spot that's suitable for that baby to give birth. And that's really what she does. And after that, she leaves. She's out. If not, she'd eat the babies and anything smaller that's kind of swimming around that area. And so that's where you get these nursery grounds, these areas that are very tailored for these younger life history stages of sharks. I mean, sharks are, man, they have no shame. Like they're cannibals. Babies from the same, mom will eat each other. Larger, sharks of the same species will eat each other. So it's tough out there. So they really need to find an environment as safe as possible um, for those little baby sharks. So yeah, no maternal investment.
Yeah.
Other than, growing really big within her.
Yeah, the nursery grounds are cool too because we can kind of see fossil evidence of them, like the area that's like termed Bone Valley in Florida. That's kind of a famous nursery ground because you see mostly these very small
Hmm.
Carcarcles or Ototus megalodon teeth, whichever your pick is.
Ah,
You
yeah.
see a bunch of them, and then it's exceedingly rare to get teeth that are larger and what you would find, hundreds of in the Meg ledges in North Carolina, for example. Almost everything there is very small.
Wow, that's super cool. Yeah, so it just goes to show you the importance of those areas across they've stayed across shark evolution, they've stayed really important. So that's really interesting.
Yeah. And on these nursery grounds, I'd imagine that the sharks' predation habits would be a little bit different than what adults would have. Because if we look at like a great white, for example, the tooth morphology of newborn great whites are very different than the adults. Like the presence of those serrations that almost form cusplets, which I'd imagine would be better suited for fish, whereas
Yeah,
the great whites have a much more standard triangular dentition.
right. And in these nursery grounds, I mean, they sound amazing, right? Wow, they're gonna be super protective and give a lot of nutrients and places to hide and whatnot. And the fact is that even in these areas, you've got mixed size classes of baby sharks. So you have ones that are just born, right, young in the years, and you may have sharks that are a year or maybe even 2 years old in some instances. And those is like a smorgasbord for those sharks eating on the little babies. So it is a really tough world. The high predation starts immediately for them. So they either have to evade being eaten, for a large chunk of their life, and they're all also looking to eat. So a lot of them, like you said, have these very varied diets when they're younger. They're scavenging and finding whatever they possibly can. And if expend a ton of energy, just trying to survive.
Hmm. So, as we were talking about, some of these baby and juvenile sharks, they have different tooth morphologies. What other morphologies do we have that are like completely different or very different than with a juvenile or newborn compared to their adult counterparts of
Yeah.
that species?
For most sharks, there isn't much, right? Other than maybe some dentition. They come out as literally mini me's, right? And their morphology. And the only, example that you might find is some of the hammerheads, right? When they're newborns, like the scallops are great. Their cephalofoils aren't, they don't reach the shape of a juvenile, right? They're kind of changing and growing into that. But for the most part, you know, there's not a lot of difference between those groups. Like a little poor beagle shark, we call them pork chops. Look, they're just a little, they're mini me. They're super cute, but they look like a little adult.
Yeah, and it's funny because those sharks are, it's kind of like a meme how they, in of themselves, even the adults, look like a baby version of a great white.
I know. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That's one of the reasons I love that species is that one, we're just starting to get to know it, right? And it's like a mix of a Mako and a white shark. I mean, two of the couple coolest sharks out there. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. And they're very closely related too. They're both within the family Lamnidae, and then their fossil record, they probably split off within the Paleogene, probably like within the late Paleocene, early Eocene around. So in the grand scheme of time, that isn't all that much.
yeah, they're that group in general is just really interesting. It's kind of switched to one of our focal species just because, for the most part, it's they're they're endothermic, which is super cool, but also for a lot of them, they're either endangered, protected, or their status is not very good.
Hmm. And let's talk a little bit about the endothermy that's found in some of these sharks, particularly within those lamnids.
Yeah, I mean, look. If you can control your body temperature, it makes you just a better predator. Um, so they're great at it, and there's levels of greatness within it. We think that probably the poor beagle or the salmon shark are the best at it, right? They can really maintain their body temperature different than their environment. I mean, 20 degrees, which is incredible, right? So they're, you know, constantly moving the water column. The poor beagle can stay. What I like really cool about the poor beagle and its endothermy is that that's a species that doesn't leave New England. Like it stays there pretty much year round, or it can stay there year round, which makes them have access to all the other fish species that other shark species would be going after if they were still there. And so, when you talk about New England and the endothermy of the poor beagle, even Makos leave because it's too cold for them. They take off. Blue sharks are out of there. They're not endothermic, they're ectothermic or poikilothermic ectotherms, but they're a seasonal group. The white sharks are a seasonal group. Threshers are seasonal up there. Basking sharks seasonal, right? Spiny dogfish. So all of them are seasonal. But poor beagle, they hang in, they take advantage of fish that are spawning, high fat content. So to have that ability is, really allows them to fill that niche.
And I can imagine that that also makes them extremely important within their environments too. The fact that they can hold that niche year round rather than only for part of the year.
Yep, absolutely. They're an incredible driver of that ecosystem, right? I mean, you talk about, apex, predators and that kind of top of the food chain. They're there year round, kind of really providing that, um, capability.
Mhm. And the salmon sharks are similar to them, right?
Man, you know what? They look almost identical. It's like you got the East Coast poor beagle, West Coast salmon shark.
Mhm.
And, Few, I would say, coloration differences, but other than that, they look really, really similar. I mean, they both have the only species that have a double caudal keel, which is was super. It's pretty awesome. So yeah, I mean, there's a really unique two shark species.
And the salmon sharks, are they in the cold waters like around Alaska year round?
They move around for sure. We're starting to see them off of California, which is crazy. But yeah, they definitely have a migration pattern. So they're not kind of hanging year round up there. At least that's my understanding. Not like the poor beagle.
Hmm.
I think chasing their food rather than, you know, a temperature thing.
Yeah. And we see up north there, we see those larger squaliforms like Greenland sharks.
Yeah.
Are those doing a similar thing where they would stay there year round, or are they also going to be migrating?
There, that species is wild. I mean, that water is so cold and they just hang there. They just hang out and they don't hardly move. You see them under ice. Yeah, they're just a wild species.
And what allows them to do that? Because they're not endotherms, right?
No, they're not. It's they've evolved to just, hang out in that super cold water, right? They don't need a lot of nutrition. They just kind of just stay motionless. A lot of the animals that they feed on, they're great scavengers, right? People have seen them eating moose. It's crazy. But I think a lot of animals will. I think there was a study where these things just lay there and things are checking them out that they think they're dead and they kind of want to eat them and then they like ambush and suck them in. So yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah, I find those really interesting too. Do you think it has to do with their metabolisms being so slow?
So slow. Yeah. I mean, it's when you get up in that water, it's amazing, right? That anything can survive, right? So for them to be able to thrive in that environment is absolutely it's pretty amazing.
Because I'd imagine that pork beagles and salmons, they would have much higher metabolisms and energy expenditures.
Much higher. And they can like they have extremes too, right? Where they wouldn't be able to deal with like they couldn't handle Greenland and places like that where it's you got ice, right?
Mm.
So I mean, they have all sharks kind of have their tolerances, right? Where once it gets kind of too bad, they'll leave. And for landed sharks that are highly mobile, it's easier for them to kind of move within a water column or move offshore. A lot of sharks will move offshore, like for example, up North Carolina, like they'll move off into the Gulf Stream, where you get these massive temperature breaks of it'll be 58 degrees Fahrenheit on the eastern side of that front, and then right when you hit that Gulf Stream, it'll go to 60, 65, 70, or even warmer. So sharks can just move. They just move,
Mm.
to a new spot.
And speaking of moving, I think I read in one of your papers you sent me about which was it the pork beagle shark that was diving
Oh,
really deep?
see that just another thing here is that was completely unexpected. So my former PhD student Brooke Anderson, who's now Dr. Brooke Anderson, was tagging and tracking mom poor beagles, and we had put a couple of tags on one, and some of the poor beagles would travel down to Bermuda, and we're like, what could be down there? We don't know what's down there, and there we're finding out that there's a lot of prey at certain times of the year at these deeper sort of mixed layers, squid and all these kind of other species. And it's a really dynamic environment. And so imagine the shark leaving New England in like I don't know, December, swimming down, and gets to Bermuda. And, a couple of weeks later, something has eaten it. Something has killed this poor beagle, which is almost 8 feet long, right? And we know that something has eaten it because it ate whatever ate the poor beagle ate the satellite tag off the shark. And we published on that, and like, well, how did it was eaten? Well, the shark was at that about 700 meters, and the water temperature was like 8 degrees Celsius or something like that. And then all of a sudden, it goes up to like 25 degrees. And so the only species that would be able to do that at that depth is a homeothermic shark or an endothermic shark. So probably, another porbeagle, mako, potentially white shark, ate this porbeagle. We saw another porbeagle that we didn't, it wasn't in the paper, that same spot, um, same depth, but this one, you can imagine just swimming around and all of a sudden it just fell to the bottom or just sank to the bottom of the ocean, like beelined and just sat there. And so what probably happened there is that that shark was swimming along and something came up behind it and bit it in half or bit its tail off and it couldn't swim and just sank to the bottom, took the tag with it. So there's something going on down there at that light level or that depth, where there's no light, this mixed layer. There's a lot of like just big predators, everything's eating. We think of, sharks being coastal and some hierarchies, but when you think about things at 1,000 meters that are 8+ feet long being eaten, that's pretty crazy.
That really is. Especially when a lot of those iconic predators from the deep sea, they're like that. They're
Yeah.
you either
Yeah.
have really small stuff or really big stuff, and there isn't a ton in between.
No, there's not. And we're finding out that there's more, I guess, diversity in these areas of predators. One of the cool things about that work is that the Bermuda Institute of Ocean Science, BIOS, they had gliders that were collecting data at about the same depth that were being attacked by sharks.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then we actually got some tooth samples, and it turns out to be probably either a dusky or a Galapagos shark at that depth, eating that, attacking things. So, just you just never know, just never know.
I'm surprised that something like that would risk attacking an 8 foot beagle.
Well, in that world down there, you don't need to be much bigger in order to make a move on something. I mean, an 8 foot poor beagle. I mean, it could have been a 10 foot Mako, right? That took it out.
Hmm.
So, it's definitely bigger. Maybe even a 9 foot Mako. Who knows? But these things are just, they're coming out of nowhere at 60 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour, whatever it is. You've got no escape if you don't know what's
Yeah.
coming.
And that's crazy too, because beagles are pretty fast too, right?
They're really fast. Yeah. I mean, they're not quite as fast as a Mako, but those things are pushing 30 plus miles an hour, right? In the water. And think about that. That's incredible.
Yeah. And do we see deep diving great whites too?
Great whites the white sharks will definitely dive deep. They've been documented down at that depth, which probably lends the culprit more towards the white shark. Makos, I mean, they're like 0 to 2 to 300 meters maybe. Um, they will go deeper, but that's kind of their sweet spot, somewhere around in that range. But yeah, something when you talk about thousand, somewhere between 1,000 and 500 to 1,000 meters, it's yeah, something I can't imagine what happens down there.
Yeah. And how deep do we know great whites go until?
I mean, they'll go 1,000, 1,500 meters, a little deeper. I mean, is that their normal kind of behavior? They're more a coastal species, but they will definitely make these deep dives to feed and do other things like that.
Hmm. And it's interesting because that's really not a species that you would expect in the deep sea. by any means. It doesn't really have that morphology.
No, no. And you go down those depths for a purpose, right? And in this case, it looks like feeding for sure. It was it a white shark? I wish we knew. But it falls into that category, right? Just based on the body temperature of that tag when it was
Yeah.
eaten.
Yeah. And I'd imagine it's hard to study things at that depth to find definitive answers.
Well, I mean, it is. It's super hard. A lot of it's luck. Like, I mean, the great thing about those tags is that you often get unexpected data. And this is what happened with those couple of sharks that got eaten, was that those sharks, those tags were meant to track an animal's movement, right? Where it was going and where its migration pathways were, how long they were spending in these areas, right? Really understanding where mom kind of hangs out, right?
Mhm.
But lo and behold, something ate it, and we got that data too. So, uh, yeah,
And what's known about great white motherhood and reproduction?
very little. It's kind of like the holy. That's kind of for most pelagic species, makos, white sharks, kind of even threshers. We're starting to understand porbeagle a little bit better now. But for most of those animals that are offshore, we know nothing about, right? We get lucky sometimes and see catch baby white sharks, in areas and like, oh, is this the nursery ground? I'm not sure. But, those little baby sharks, they can go 200 miles a day, no problem. So were they given birth like offshore and then they swam inshore? Did mom, kind of give birth to one here and then swam up a little bit more and give another birth to another one? And we don't know. Like we don't know. I mean, the data is so sparse and infrequent that we it you know it's, we know nothing literally.
Yeah. And that's crazy, especially considering how the great whites are kind of like the pinnacle of shark research. And like
Yeah.
everybody's infatuated with that species. And yet here we have like a major component of their biology that we just don't fully
hmm
understand.
Yeah, part of the with white sharks and other species too is that they don't mature until they're huge. Like, you know, I think the number right now that's tossed around is 16 feet, for a female white shark. That's a big shark. Like we've caught white sharks, 12 footers, but I can't imagine, one that's 4 foot longer. I mean, that's a big animal. So it's a needle in the haystack. When we in our reproductive work, we're out in certain areas of the world, trying to catch sharks, which can be hard in itself, right? When you think about, all right, well, I'm looking for a specific species, a specific sex, and a specific stage of reproduction, right? It's like so hard to put all those kind of things together. So a lot of the work that we do is really collaborative you know, with individuals in other areas of the world that have an an idea or understanding of where those sharks might be, what stage of reproduction they might be in. And so, yeah, it can be really frustrating to go out and just get nothing day after day after day.
Yeah. And how do you go about capturing data from, say, a 16-foot great white? Because I can't imagine swimming next to it would be very
That'd be
fun.
tough. Yeah. So, I mean, there's just different ways, right? I mean, for a lot of areas where you can't fish, right? Let's say ecotourism, right? Ecotourism spots. The Maldives is a great example. You've got a dive spot where, 11 dive shops are using. It's a huge income for the local economy. And then we show up in a boat and catch them, right? And tag them and release them. That could screw up, their behavior, all that kind of stuff. So, for some animals, we can actually get in the water in a cage, right? And the shark swims by, and we can determine if it's pregnant or not by by using the ultrasound. So, like in the Maldives, those sharks were free swimming, and as they were swimming by, we were ultrasounding them, and so we can get enough information to see if they're pregnant or not. So we could do that. A lot of the work we do is catch and release, and so in areas where we can catch them, like we can target. different species. So we don't normally go out and be like, we're going for Makos. We usually just go out and, do we catch a thresher shark? Do we catch a Mako? Do we catch a, white shark? Whatever we catch, first thing we do if it's a female, ultrasound, the whole nine yards. And for us, the more we can learn about in sharks in general, and reproduction and movement and defining, where those corridors are for mom and where those areas are that she may need for gestation or her nursery sites where she's going to give birth, and how those are affected by, anthropogenic changes, environmental changes, right? Or it's always a tough mix of different questions and different problems that we're always trying to solve out there. Um, Focusing on this really specific life history stage. So it's hard to put those pieces of the puzzle together sometimes. It takes a long time.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me into a question that I've had, which is how do these shark reproductive strategies affect their vulnerability, both naturally and environmentally?
Yeah, I mean, look, the thing about sharks in general, is that they're a lot like us, and they typically grow slow. They reproduce few offspring. They don't mature until late in life. So for, moms that are carrying babies, and if they're caught, right, in a commercial fishing or they are caught mistakenly, right, in some other gear type, or their environments are changing where they might want to give birth, like all that can wipe a shark population out pretty quickly because they reproduce so slowly. Some sharks, don't reproduce every other year, right? And some it's proposed to be every 3 years. And for like a white shark, they might not reach maturity until they're 20 years old. So you can imagine that
And
puts
for
them.
Greenland sharks, isn't it like 150 or some crazy number?
It's that shark is just it's an anomaly, right? I mean, it's wild. But yeah, most sharks, I would say, behave a lot like us, right? Especially the larger species, somewhere, between, 10 to 15 years old is when they're really reaching their maturity. So, yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, and I can't imagine it helps that sharks aren't exactly the best moms either.
No, no, like I said, great. They're great at, providing the environment to have little babies grow up inside them, right? And so, um, the coming out as little mini me's really helps their chances for sure. But, after that, there's no nurturing, there's no nothing, and they're on their own for sure.
Yeah, and I've heard that Ufiji helps them prepare for after after the pups are given birth, that they can have that like predatory instinct.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think that all modes of their reproduction, the babies come out ready to go. They come out ready to go, and they're given opportunities to figure it out. Like, um, for even egg layers that are born, they typically have a little bit of yolk left inside their stomach, so that they have a couple of days to figure it out once they're hatched. Same thing for other species of shark. There's a little bit of reserve, whether it's really big liver or a little bit of leftover egg in the stomach or whatnot, that gives them the opportunity to sort of like, okay, I'm out. Let me figure this out. How to hunt, how to do my thing. So I'd say that, I don't know if the mode of reproduction would prepare them any better than their sort of evolutionary development across that taxa.
Hmm. And have we found any or has have humans caused any shark species that we know of to have become extinct? Because I know that there was the Pondicherry shark that was believed to be extinct, but one was found again.
Yeah, how we fish them out or remove them to extinction, not that I'm aware of. Um, Not that I'm aware of. I mean, they've been around for so long, right? They find a way to sort of come back. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
They're the ultimate predator. So, um, been around for what, 400 million years, something like that. Long time.
Chondrichthyans, yeah.
Yeah,
Chondrichthyans have been around even longer, and then we always find like these denticles
yeah.
that make us like push it back even further.
And it's the thing, we're always learning more and new stuff, right? About this group. It's wild. We're always finding new species. We're finding new fossils, right? That help us understand, how long they've really been around. And yeah, so it's a cool group.
Yeah, it really is. And what do you think that the biggest threats that shark face right now are?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough question because um, here in we'll say North America, um, United States, Canada, even Mexico, they're getting better. We have pretty good management in place. In the United States, a lot of shark species are recovering, right? Populations are rebounding. They're doing really well. So in that respect, it's not really fishing pressure, right? Uh, in our area, it's other things like habitat destruction, right? Environmental change that may shift distributions of sharks, but also may shift the distributions of their prey, right? And so sharks will follow their prey. And so we've seen that in almost every species that there's shifts in distribution patterns. But if you get into other areas of the world where sharks are still on the menu, then it's like a double whammy, right? You've got, the fishing pressure, you've got the potential habitat, environmental changes that might be happening. So it can be a tough go if all those things are going against them.
Hmm. And what has your research helped with conservationally for understanding these sharks and their vulnerabilities?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my early work was all based on sort of the classic aging growth, right? And how slow those processes were. So that that morphed into, okay, now we know that all these groups are really susceptible to overfishing and environmental changes and all these different things. What are ways we can help protect them, right? And that's where, studying moms and their migration patterns, their gestational lengths, finding their parturition sites have all helped to better understand what areas we need to protect, right? And so now we're working and looking at connectivities between marine reserves, marine protected areas, right? And so we know sharks move. When they do move from a protected area, what's their corridor, right? Is it protected area to protected area? Are they moving just outside the protected area? Do we need to make it bigger? And so those are the things that our work is helping to kind of focus in and fine tune, ways and again, how do we protect mom along her route, but then protect that area she's going to give birth is critical.
Hmm. And how do you age a shark? How do you tell how old it is?
So for a shark, the only way we can really tell there's a couple of ways you can do all of them are lethal, right? So you have to sacrifice the animal. Um, Vertebrae uh, is the most traditional way. We are starting to get eye lenses are starting to look into that. You can also do, um, you know, carbon dating, things like that. Sometimes you get lucky with your spines, which is can be non-lethal, but for the most part, that's um, what you have to do, and that's why for most of the species that we know these really good this data for is for animals that are commercially fished, right? And so we can just get that information. We can just go to the market or work with the fishing industry to collect the samples. For a lot of species, we just don't know it. I mean, who wants to kill a 15-foot tiger shark? Just to get their
Yeah.
vertebrae. You know what I mean? It's like nobody wants to do that. And that's again why we developed the non-invasive techniques for reproduction because now we don't have to do that. Now we can just give her an ultrasound or let her swim away.
Yeah. I could definitely see that being an issue when we're talking about these critically endangered species.
Yeah, and so learning how to better study the animals in their environment is always a challenge, but things that we're trying to slowly kind of develop.
Yeah. And what are your future plans for research? What are you looking to better figure out?
Yeah, I mean, it's always we are really, I'd say over the last maybe 2 to 4 years, we've really started to perfect the use of multiple tag types. So we have the intrauterine tag, the birth tag, which we can put in a shark and she'll carry it. And then when she gives birth, um, that tag pops out of her uterus. So we implant it inside mom, non-invasively. So coupling that with a fin mount tag or a PSAT on mom so we can track her movement. And then, understanding, how we can link that together is really what we're trying to do, perfect it. So perfecting those different types of techniques. So a better ultrasound, right? High definition, one that's more mobile, one that's water resistant, and again multiple different tag types now that we can put on sharks. So that's kind of where we're developing it, and it's still in its infancy. We've only used this technology on a handful of different species, so we really need to go across reproductive modes, geographic areas. And so there's a lot of questions out there for sure.
Hmm. I really appreciate having you on, James. I have this one question that I ask every one of my guests, and that is if you were to make one discovery in your lifetime, what would that discovery be?
Man, that's a great question. I mean, it's the Holy Grail, right? Where are white sharks giving birth? And what's the migration route of mom? Like that's like the Holy Grail. Um, and so, you know, I think we're working towards that slowly, and that's why we're hitting on these other species to better perfect that. So when we do get the chance, and we get a white shark that might be pregnant, we'll be ready.
Yeah. And do you have any hypotheses for that in the meantime, where that's happening?
Oh man, the hypotheses, God, uh, you know, potentially Sia Cortez is a spot that they might be giving birth in uh, off of North America, potentially New York, like that area, Rhode Island. Like there's a lot of baby sharks that are showing up there. So, again, where do they originate? Is it offshore? Does mom go inshore? Right? I mean, we don't know. And so that's kind of where we're at with all this stuff is putting those pieces together. And hopefully some of the technology we're developing will allow us to do that.
Hmm. Thank you again, James, for joining us. And for those that are watching, if you got this far, I know you're shark nerds, so please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you never miss a new video. And yeah, thank you.